This time I'll call to order the December 5th meeting of the Grafton Zoning Board of Appeals. Our first order of business is actually going to be to enter into an executive session. So at this point, I'd entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation with the intent to resume back to open meeting in this room upon its conclusion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Chapin?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Ms. Reed? Mr.
Yes.
Rogers?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So we are now in executive session. We'll adjourn to the one behind us. And for those who remain, we'll be back hopefully maybe 20 minutes thereabouts. Second, prepare myself here. The next order of business will be case number 864 for 3 Millbury Street.
Chair, do you mind if I have a seat?
Yep.
Come on.
But hang on a second. I gotta ramble on for a few minutes.
Of course.
Okay, next order of business is case number 864, 3 Millbury Street, requesting a special permit to allow a carriage house accessory building to be used as a one-bedroom apartment. At this time, ask the board to introduce themselves. Brian, you can start.
Brian Wallen. Kyle Chapin.
Bill Yeomans, Vice Chair.
Bill McCusker, Chairman.
Kay Reed, clerk.
Mary Ann DeRogers.
Katrina Koshavos.
Bob Berger, zoning enforcement officer.
The way we're going to proceed this evening is the clerk will read the petition, and after the clerk has read the petitioner will have the floor and the opportunity to present their case. There'll be a 15-minute time limit for the petitioner. This time limit can be extended with the consent of the board. The petitioner shall present required information, and all comments should be specific. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition will have an opportunity to do so. Any letters in favor will be read into the record. At that time, anybody in opposition will be allowed to speak, and any letters in opposition will be read into the record. The opposition will also have a 15-minute time limit. After all the evidence is presented, the board will enter into a discussion, hopefully come up with a decision. At any time during this hearing and prior to a decision being made by the board, the petitioner has the option to request that the petition be withdrawn without prejudice or continued until a later date, at which time further evidence specific to the petition can be presented. Anyone wishing to speak, please approach one of the microphones and give their name and address. The board may ask questions from time to time. However, all conversations should be directed through the chair. At this time, I'd ask the clerk to read the petition.
It's the legal notice from the Grafton Board of Appeals has received a petition from Mary Gilgallen for 3 Millbury Street, requesting that the Zoning Board of Appeals grant a special permit for the carriage house accessory building permit for residential use to be modified to allow a one-bedroom apartment to be located therein. The carriage house was built along with the main dwelling roughly in 1839 and was properly permitted as a playroom, exercise bonus room in 1989. The buildings and residential use thereof predates the present zoning bylaws, which do not generally allow residential uses in this zone. Granting of this special permit modify the non-conforming use will not be more detrimental to the neighborhood and will not negatively impact the neighborhood traffic patterns or pedestrian safety. Book 41614, page 195. Map 74, Lot 123. The board will conduct a public hearing Thursday, December 5th, 2019, at 7 p.m. in Conference Room A. Zoning Board of Appeals, William McCusker, Bill Yeomans, Kay Reed, Carl Chapin, Mary Ann DeRogers, and Brian Waller. Case number 864.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have a conflict that they need to recuse themselves for? Then at this point, the petitioner has the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Eli Lano. I'm an attorney at Mayer, Antonellis, Jackowitz, and Haranis in Milford. I'm joined tonight by Mrs. Gilgallen. I think that from the petition, the facts on this are relatively simple, that this is two buildings on a lot. One is a two-family residential home, and one was the coterminously built carriage house, which is about 1,200 square feet of usable space inside. It's been finished, as noted, to be sort of a bonus room, exercise room, finished space. and would easily be able to be turned and used as an apartment if this board saw fit to do so. The standard for changing the use, this is in the neighborhood business zone, so it is a pre-existing non-conforming use because this is a residential use and has been so for the entire time that the main home was there, and the other building used alongside with it as an accessory structure, which is allowed in, I believe, every zone in Grafton under the bylaws. So the standard under 40A Section 6 and under this town's bylaws in Section 3.4.3.5 is that a pre-existing non-conforming use can be changed or altered so long as that change, extension, or alteration shall not be substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming use to the neighborhood. So the crux of our request to this board would be a finding that this change in use would not be substantially more detrimental. And this is a situation where I think we would add a couple car trips a day if this was a rented unit. It's in a spot right next to the Grafton Common where there's already a relative amount of traffic for a town of this size, and also direct abutters include a pediatric, I think it's a doctor's building, and then also the church is right on the square there. So certainly on Sundays they'll generate far more traffic than this could any single day. I think it would be helpful maybe for me to answer any questions that the board may have on this.
Okay, so just to summarize, we have a two-family use in the neighborhood business zone where, despite having neighborhood in the name, residences aren't allowed. So that makes it a non-conforming use. Your intention is to add a third, so really at that point now you're becoming a multifamily.
Well, it is already multifamily.
Well,
but
no,
yes, to add
the town has a concept of a duplex, a two-family, which is different than a three-family, which is multifamily.
that's a fair reading.
So the intention is to change it to a multifamily use. What we've typically done when we change uses is, we try to follow the process that the planning board would follow if this came to the planning board. If you came to the planning board and asked for a multifamily, what would the process be? And that's site plan approval, right? And, that may seem kind of onerous, but there's a lot to multifamily construction that this board certainly isn't in a position to just make a decision on based on strictly that one finding that you mentioned. For example, is there enough parking, right? 3 units should be 2.5 units, 2.5 parking spots per unit, so that's 6, 7.5, 8 spots, I believe, if my math is right. Are there that many parking spots? Where are they? Is there adequate access for emergency personnel, emergency fire access, things like that? All those sorts of things need to be reviewed. So I assume that you don't at this time have a site plan or anything like that.
Well, in a situation like this where the buildings are both existing and have been for well over 100 years, no, we didn't get a new site plan drawn up, but
Okay.
I understand the rationale you're using in deferring to the planning board's site plan approval type criteria, but under the clearly defined law in the Commonwealth, that isn't the standard that this really requires. It's if this would be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. So
it's up to us to make that decision about being substantially more detrimental, and really we have wide latitude in what we can decide we need to make that determination. Right, and just kind of flip it around. You alluded to traffic. There's a lot more than just traffic if we're going to discuss whether something is more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Right.
So, and as I said, our process has been in the past to basically go through a site plan approval process. Yeah, we may be able to waive some things, some stormwater calculations or some, that sort of stuff, if that's part of it. I don't even know off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and review it. But I do think we need a lot of that type of information to actually make a decision. So, all right, so, and I quite frankly, I didn't expect you to have it, but I just want to make sure that you didn't necessarily have it. At this point, are there any questions or thoughts or comments from the board?
I have a question.
Mr. Yeomans.
I have a question, Bob. In your letter dated June 10th, it's come to the attention. How did this come to your attention of this accessory building being used as a separate dwelling unit?
In the past, the assessors look at what's on the market for sale, and they discover that something was not permitted, like a finished basement or a carriage house being used as an apartment. And then I would get a note, or I'd get a memo, and I would take appropriate action from there.
Okay. And at the time, in May, I believe this was on the market in May of this year?
The building was, yes.
The building, was it under agreement?
Um,
Perhaps you could come to the table too, because we probably have some additional questions that save you from getting up and sitting down. So I would like to better understand the process. Okay, it came to the attention through a listing. And as I looked at the listing, and I was living at the time in Grafton Center, it appeared to be sold. Was that the case?
It was under agreement, and then the buyers came back after we were under agreement and said that they understood that the carriage house wasn't livable, so they wanted to change the offer, and then I backed out of the agreement.
Okay. So they were thinking that that was going to be rental income for them.
They were going to live in it.
They were gonna live
The people
in
who were
it.
going to buy it were going to live in it.
Because the house itself, if I look at the listing, it's very open and,
Yeah, no, just to be clear, the carriage house has been lived in for years prior to me buying the house and me owning the house.
and how long has that been, ma'am?
20 years I've owned the house. And it's completely finished and livable. Nothing needs to happen for anyone to live there. It's already done.
So, just so I'm clear, so the kitchen was added. It was permitted back in '89 as a playroom exercise room.
With a restriction not to be used as a single dwelling.
Okay, and yet for the past 20 years, it's been lived in. Has it been rented all that time?
I actually lived in it for a while when I first bought the home.
And when was that?
I bought the home in 2002.
Okay. And then how long did you live in it before you then rented it as a separate unit?
I lived in it a couple years, and I had my parents living in the main
Okay.
house, and then I moved into the main house and started renting the carriage house.
And you said when you bought it, it had been being used previously.
Yeah, the sellers to me told me that had been lived in or used that way, not as nice as then when they changed it in 1989. They really made it a nice carriage house. Before that, it wasn't as nice, but there were still people living in it. They said there's a big history of that. They owned the house 20 years. So, and they themselves lived in it. You know, they raised their family in the main house, and then they renovated the carriage house, and they had a house on the Cape, I think, and they were going back and forth. But living in the carriage house, without a stove, you know, in the bonus room.
When did the stove show up?
I put a stove in. I mean, the kitchen was always there. I have done nothing in the carriage house in the ways of improvements. I did add a stove, but there was a kitchen there. There was a refrigerator when I moved in, and there was a sink and a kitchen setup. So all I had to do was put a stove, slide a stove in.
So, all right, so in my mind, the situation is this, we have a two-family with, we can call it a carriage house, it might also be called a garage. And, the request really is to take that other building and convert it into an apartment. And without even getting into any of the site plan stuff, which I think we would have to if we're gonna grant this, to the point of being more detrimental to the neighborhood, I have a real problem with that. If we allow this extra building on this property to be converted into an apartment, and then everybody then can convert their garage into an apartment, suddenly now we double the capacity of that neighborhood. And I don't think that that's really the intent of the bylaw. And I do think that becomes something that is more detrimental to the neighborhood. So right on the surface, I have a problem with allowing, this third apartment in this situation. Especially when the planning board is already basically issued, or was it the planning board or was it a building permit? It was a building permit.
It was a building permit.
Especially when, the building permit was already issued with very clear instructions that it was not to be an apartment. So, that's my feeling on this. If others on the board think that, there's merit here and they want to proceed and possibly grant a special permit, let's say that, and then I think we need to talk about, do we need to get more information, from the applicant?
I think I'd like the cease and desist order to be addressed, because technically, in order for that building to be occupied as a residence, a separate residence, you need to go through the certain, planning board, the permits, you need a certificate of occupancy, and I think those steps are all not even taken.
But I would, not to interrupt you if you're still going, but I'd like to speak to that. I think that this is our first step toward remedying all that. The stove was removed per the zoning enforcement
Okay.
officer's request, that everything in the cease and desist was complied with. And now we're in front of this board respectfully requesting the opportunity to permit this.
So basically, you want to turn back the clock and get the permits you were supposed to at the beginning. In a sense.
In a sense, I think that it's never too late to do it, right?
But, to the chair's point, anybody can turn their garage into an apartment without going through the necessary permit process and, and put an ad in the paper to say we're renting out a garage.
Until you get
Well,
caught.
but until you
Right?
get caught.
Right,
you can't.
exactly,
So,
right.
that could happen anywhere, I think.
So, my concern is, we're allowed to have multifamily in multifamily, and that's two principal structures on one piece of property. That's where this whole conversation's really coming in right now. Because you have a two-family, and now you want to have another principal use on that. Now, I don't care if you grant the special permit or not, but that's the issue that we're facing right now. Because we've had plenty of requests in the past 20 years where, I want to have my barn converted to make it an in-law apartment. And then I had to come up with the definition of what is substantially contained within a single-family dwelling for the accessory apartment. But that really mirrors this conversation that we're having right now, is two principal structures on one lot. That's what we're really talking about today.
And you did mention that if you do consider it that way, the square footage isn't enough for the three buildings.
Well, if
Something
you-
with
if you-
13,000 square feet in
right.
the lot, you'd need 16,000 square feet
Right.
to include the, to
If
be compliant.
That's if we were in residential multifamily, because that's the only zoning you're really allowed to have two principal structures.
Right.
Or many principal structures on one lot, is in residential multifamily.
If I could address two of the other things, Mr. Chairman, you talked about the opportunity that there would be sort of a creep in the idea that if you allow this, then other people will try to do these same things. And I don't have to tell this board, which is very well educated and has been doing this for a long time, all of you, that each one of these is taken de novo. You're not setting precedent on this. So I think then you have to consider what this specific spot is, that it is two buildings, it was built in 1839 as a big building, was renovated with proper permits for the renovation. The use obviously strayed from what was requested and permitted. I'm not going to deny any part of that. But this is also, it is in the specific zone that it's in. It's in neighborhood business. So we have an 1839 residential building. And as a two-family dwelling, that's not the best and most use that the owner of this property has out of it, because by right, she can have business up to 5,000 square feet in this. So if we talk about detrimental to the neighborhood, if she wanted to put a cobbler in this spot and be the only one in a type of business, picking for example, where there aren't that many and people would have need for it, there's going to be a lot more car trips generated. Or her neighbor being the pediatric doctor's office, things like that. You could permit low impact type things like dentist, I'm sure we could get put in there at the right amount of space, and it'll be substantially more detrimental. And none of that is to say that it's a threat, of course, that we'd change the use. But I think when you're considering the detrimental impact to the neighborhood, thinking about if we had one apartment, one bedroom, one car most likely, versus having this be a by right allowed commercial use, what is best for the neighborhood in this part of Grafton?
So two responses to that. One is, you're right, we know that we don't set precedent, but when considering allowing something, you have to expand it out, right? So it's not, we can't just take it in a vacuum. So that's why I'm saying that you have to expand it out, because, if we took each one in a vacuum and strictly in a vacuum, we could find ourselves where we've doubled the capacity of the neighborhood. So it does tie into, what others may ask for and may get. If you have to realize that at some point before this whole situation arose, the town of Grafton made a decision that that neighborhood was to be neighborhood business, right? That's not this board that made that decision, the town did. So actually, the town would love to see a cobbler in that building, would love to see, right? I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's where the zoning is. So the town wants what you just described. That's what they want there. And by the way, if you actually did go to put a cobbler in there, you could come to this board and try to do it under a special permit change of pre-existing non-conforming use, or you could go to the planning board because it says S in the.
It doesn't actually though, because it conforms. I have up to 5,000 square
Okay, so
feet
by right.
right.
Okay, but so regardless, so then you can, fine, then you can do that, and that's what the zoning district wants, and that's what, that's what they.
But I think as we discuss this, that brings us back to that standard that 40A Section 6, this is a pre-existing non-conforming use, and your zoning bylaws, which control here, these two things in that 3.4.3.5, the legislative intent or the intent in drafting those was to mirror 40A Section 6. So as we try to expand what we want to consider on all of this, which I understand and I respect that this board makes every decision it can to better this town, and appreciate the thoughtfulness with which you consider all of these. But as we continuously change the standing, I think we've moved beyond the legislative intent that is written in your bylaws.
Can I ask a question? Like, I have neighbors like right across from me that are multifamily. That's the part I don't understand. It's just the layman here. There's a 4-family right across directly. There's a 6-family. All those are right there. Are they in neighborhood business too?
Let's assume they are, then they would be pre-existing, non-conforming, just like you are with the 2-family.
But like the people who sold me this house, and my house has a plaque on it, and I've read a little bit of history. They've told me that people have lived in that building for years and years. It has been used that way over history.
Yeah,
of Grafton.
I can't speak to that. If there is a, if that's the case, then that's an issue for the zoning enforcement officer to deal with, and but clearly, there's a permit that says it wasn't lived in back in '89, and it wasn't supposed to be lived in. So, I think that's kind of getting out of the scope of what we need to look at. Mr. Yeomans.
The point you make about the neighborhood business, the 5,000 square feet, it still has to be something that is not more detrimental. You still have to look at the parking and all of the issues that might be associated with that cobbler or that crafts business that might go in there. I looked at this, and I've driven by, and I see the pictures of the listing, which I went out and looked at the listing, and I looked at the house, and the carriage house has been, it's been well done, and it's an apartment, and I got thinking about it. Okay, what are my feelings on it? I think that apartments that will accommodate 1 to 2 people are very important, and I have an affinity for that. I mean, we look at a lot of issues trying to make accommodate affordable housing and decent apartments in town. Have you attempted to rent this in Airbnb?
No.
Okay. if I were to consider this and to consider your request, I would want to and have to check if to what extent this is possible. But I would not want to see this to be available on Airbnb, on short-term rentals, under any circumstances. You've already, it's been discovered, and you've kind of you've taken out the stove, and is that correct? And
Yes.
And have you taken out the kitchen, or is it just the stove?
It
So
was
it's,
just, yeah, there's a wet bar, there's a
if
sink.
somebody wants to cook something, they go in the house at this point. There's no
Nobody's
stove.
living, it's empty right now.
Oh, it's empty.
We're trying
So,
to
you know,
comply, Mr.
I
Burgers.
I would want to see it be very restricted, so it remains, to be not more detrimental to the neighborhood as far as a rental. And it would be a long-term rental, but, you know, I would want to put restrictions on it, on any short-term rentals, of any sort.
And the other question that I had is, I mean, rental or livable, I think, you know, for me, you know, I have an adult child who he's disabled, and, you know, the question of him living there. So it's not just that I want to rent it, but I want it to be able to have it livable. And right now, under this permit, it's not livable. So I'm not necessarily saying it's all about rental. I just want it granted that it's livable.
But understand, if your situation were to change, then someone else comes along and now it's a rental. So we're dealing with, you know, with your immediate case, but it's gonna survive, you know, sometime after, you know,
If
circumstances.
the board
Chairman.
saw fit to grant this, we would certainly be willing to have restrictions that it couldn't be used as an Airbnb or whatever comes after that type of program. I think that's
I think we can condition that if,
Can we?
We probably can.
Yeah.
Mr.
I got
Chairman.
I have a question. How is the septic plugged into this? Does it go attached to the house, or is it,
It's town sewer.
yeah, but does it go through the main house, or does it have separate sewers?
Does it have its own sewer meter, or
No,
is it?
does it
tied
have
into-
its own sewer line coming in?
Say again?
Your question is there a stub for that carriage house that goes right to the street? I think that's your question.
Yes.
I don't have that answer.
I don't either.
It probably goes through the house. There's probably one stub for that property,
do you get two sewer bills or one sewer? bill?
One sewer bill.
It's
one stub.
it's one stub.
Does it have
Rest
a
assured, they'd
bathroom?
have,
2 bathrooms.
In the carriage house, there's a bathroom?
1.5.
1.5 baths.
And, you know, what's everyone's thoughts at this point? You know, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable with it.
I think we need more information.
But I'm struggling with how it's detrimental to the neighborhood. And I understand the, you know, the perception and, you know, the risk of, you know, others wanting to do this, but just the history of being used for this purpose for 100 years or more.
Yeah, we don't necessarily know that part of it, though. You know, we know that in '89 it wasn't. And it was, and a decision was made, and owners agreed back in '89 that it wouldn't be used that way. But, yeah, you know, I think taken by itself, you know, an argument can be made that this is not more detrimental to the neighborhood. But I struggle with doing it in a vacuum like that, because there's a lot of other barns and buildings like this, you know, that suddenly could become apartments.
I feel like, though, she does have a good point. If it's in the commercial district and there's other multi-families around, she's not trying to do this in like my residential neighborhood, or, you know, where we all live. It's downtown Grafton, and, you know, there's other I don't know that for a fact. I'm taking your word
There's
for that.
multifamilies all around the common.
Yeah, right.
All around the
So,
common.
No
North
doubt.
I mean, to add another car, I mean, if we have to get a site plan to make sure there's the right space, and
Right.
fire department can get, I don't know, all that stuff, but to me, I kind of agree with Brian. To me, it doesn't seem detrimental. I don't feel like she's asking to change, they're not adding on, they're not changing the building. She would just like to be able to use it, put a stove in there, use it for somebody to live there. Doesn't bother me, so, because of the location of where it is in town.
What would be a more detrimental use is Katie O'Neill's Irish step dances coming in there. No, I don't, I say that
Yeah,
as a,
right.
you know, that's a village
Right.
use you could have.
Yeah.
And
right.
we're talking about an apartment. It's not, it is existing, you know, it's been discovered. It shouldn't have been a rental, but, and we know you're here, and I have some sympathy for, you know, for that. But I don't see that it's, I don't think it's a more detrimental use. But if I were to vote for this, I'd want to see it restricted in every way possible to ensure that it not be used for any other purpose but living. In other words, can we take it off the rolls as a, you know, as the neighborhood business that could be allowed to go in here? That we're turning it into apartments, so therefore, that's what it's gonna remain.
I think
I don't think we can do that.
Well,
that's spot zoning.
We can't do
I
that.
think.
No,
Yeah,
you
no, we
can't-
can't do that.
you can't do that, but if it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. So with that pre-existing non-conforming use, you really can't put a cobbler in there right now.
Okay.
Because that's something that
It's different.
is different from pre-existing. You're either a pre-existing non-conforming use, we don't have mixed use. That would take another special permit for you.
Okay.
Because the only mixed use that we have is village mixed use, which again, that's in the other part of town.
Wait a minute. They're in a neighborhood business, and as the attorney pointed out, you know, retail establishments serving the convenience goods needs of a local area, including the limited grocery, delicatessen, bakery, supermarket, drugstores, or similar uses, up to 5,000 square feet.
That's right.
That's allowed by right.
Yes.
Right, and I would hope that attorney will agree with what I'm saying. That would now be two principal uses on one lot.
Yeah. And
Oh, if you were to do that with just a carriage house, but if you were to take the
Right.
whole property,
Yo, absolutely.
Yeah.
You
They
can
can
take the
just
whole
do that.
property.
Turn it
and-
into a
and
convenience store.
Turn it into a convenience
Yeah.
store,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
No, I understand that. And by the way, you know, when we're talking about, you know, it would be better for this to be a multifamily than the current two-family that it is now, you know, let's keep in mind, that's not what somebody before us decided. They decided that should be neighborhood business, right? So we're, you know, when we say that this is not more detrimental, you know, who are we to say that? The town as a whole, at town meeting, decided that this would be neighborhood business. You know, it's really not for us to make a decision that it's not, and that, you know, no, it really would be better if this is multifamily. But it's not.
But
that's not
wasn't
for us
that
to-
But somebody already
laid
lives
over what was already there?
Well, sure, but
It was already
but
units being lived in.
yeah, but they could have said, well, there's a whole bunch of residences, so let's make this an R zone, or there's a whole bunch of multifamilies making an MF zone, and they didn't. I'm not saying I agree with it, right? I think it's silly. But, you know, let's just kind of keep that in mind when we're talking about it, but that's all fine. If the consensus of the board is that we want to do this, or do we want to just let them go? Do we want, what other information do we want? Mr. Yeomans.
If I may. One of the main house is really, it was a 4-bedroom house at one point, and it's been the interior's all been changed.
When I bought that house, honestly, the main house was 3 units.
And it's, right now, as I looked at it online,
It's
it's
2
very open. It has a loft.
That's the carriage house.
That's the carriage house.
That's the carriage house. The
Complete-
main
okay.
house is 2 units, like upstairs is one
Oh,
two-bedroom
okay.
unit.
So that's the
and
carriage house that the
yes,
pictures.
with those
The
pictures of the
grand,
carriage house.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, if
So
I
it's
could
2 plus this would be the third, okay.
If I could address your previous point about when the zoning changed and what gives this board the right to make that decision. We all know that zoning is proactive, which is how we end up with these pre-existing non-conforming uses. But I would argue that by the way that your bylaw differs from 48 Section 6, Section 6 says that the special permit granting authority, without listing it, your town bylaw makes the zoning board of appeals finds that such extension, alteration, or change will not be substantially more detrimental. I think that right there is exactly what gives you the right now in 2019 to make a change or make that finding.
No doubt, but, you know, to say that, you know, a multifamily is better for the neighborhood than a cobbler or a convenience store, we're essentially saying that we know better than what town meeting said years ago. Right? So years ago, town meeting said that neighborhood should be cobblers and convenience stores, et cetera, and we're saying it would be better if it was multifamily.
think-
Well, then the town should have made it a multifamily zone.
Again,
I'm not saying we don't have the right to say that. We absolutely have the right to say that. We have the right to put in an airport there if we want.
maybe
Maybe. But
federal.
all I'm saying is, you know, to say that multifamily would be better than the convenience store, it's like,
But with the utmost respect, I think you're changing the standard that 48 Section 6 and your bylaws reflect, because this doesn't have to be better. It only has to be no more
no more-
detrimental,
good point,
which is
yeah.
a very easy standard compared to better, which is completely subjective. I think all of you live
yeah.
in a neighborhood and you know what the difference is if Cumberland Farms goes in versus if one more car is parked in
Yep.
your lot. So I don't think we should change the standard, and I think if we apply the law as it's written, I don't think this is that difficult a finding to make. Again, with the utmost respect.
So, you know, for multifamily homes, a site plan is typically something that's reviewed, you know, and really what, you know, you're after things like make sure there's sufficient parking, make sure there's sufficient emergency access, things along those lines. I would think that we'd want that level of information, you know,
I mean, I think it'd make us feel more comfortable.
if we're gonna proceed in this direction. I mean, is that something that you're able to provide us?
So if we continue this for a month and we get a site plan drawn up showing where people would park, and because I wonder if as we borrow rules from the planning board for this board, I don't know the standard I'm trying to meet, which I certainly would like to meet the standard that will make this board comfortable with what this is. But we're not gonna be able to put in a hammerhead driveway for a fire truck or something on an 1839 lot with two existing buildings. You know, that's a little bit to the point of absurdity, but I'm trying to make a point.
No, it's a very valid point. And the way that I think these things normally transpire is the developer or the proponent would actually meet with the development staff here. What do you know, to establish what it is that they would expect and need. And that probably really should be the next step, is to meet with, you know, and I tried to get a little bit of input from the town planner. He's actually on his way, you know, out the door in January.
I heard that. So,
But that doesn't, we still have staff in town who probably should work with you and say, all right, this is what we need to know. Right? And then they would advise back to this board that this is what's been requested, and, you know, what do you think, Mr. Berger?
Yeah, I think Thursdays would be great for you to meet, and the number for parking spaces is 7.
Okay.
All right, because it's 2.25 per unit, not 2 point.
All right, 2.5.
I know, but I wanted to correct that because I didn't want him to struggle for that extra. In the site
What was
plan,
the multiplier? Sorry,
2.25. All right, and
How
that's
many
in
spaces do you have?
that's in 422.
I know, like,
All right.
well, I'm saying, so visually, can you go with visual, because it's got a big parking lot?
No,
And-
I would say that, you know, planning board, if we're gonna adopt planning board, they're gonna wanna see it lined out with a certified plot plan to make sure that you can fit everybody in there. With police and fire, you know, you got the main drag. They're not gonna bring the fire truck in because they're not going to.
And it's not such a farce.
It's not, that's not a far reach at all. So I think your biggest hurdle right now is to get the plan surveyed and get the actual, parking spaces on that surveyed plan.
So I'm gonna modify a little bit of what you just said. I think ideally, I think ideally you should meet with the development team in town hall here,
Okay.
right? And I think they should advise what sorts of things we want to see. And quite frankly, you know, if you think that it's over the top, if you think it's excessive, come back to us and say, you know what, this is what they want. Do we really need all this? You know, because we have the ability to say, we don't need anything at all, or we need everything,
Right.
right? So, but I think you really need to get that input that Bob just alluded to. And, you know, yeah, maybe the fire department turns around and says no. Maybe they don't. You know, maybe they do have some concerns. Can they get ladders up? You know, the carriage house, I guess, is one story, so maybe ladders isn't a problem. You know, but it's that sort of stuff. Or actually, I don't know, maybe they can't get ladders somewhere else. I mean, you know, so let's get that input from the development team.
And we meet every Thursday
During the.
during the day.
Okay.
2 o'clock, walk-ins. After that, you call planning and you can set up an appointment.
Can I just,
And you give me the heads up, so maybe I can get the fire department there too.
one thing too, I think that would be really important, going through these steps may seem like it's a lot, but I think down the road, when you go to sell this property at some point, you're gonna say, all of this work's been done, it's all in place, it's all legally permitted. I think it's gonna be a good selling tool as well. So you going through this little bit of a, whatever it is, a little extra, I think it's gonna make your property it's gonna make it more solid. It's gonna be better for you in the long run, so I think it's a good thing, for sure.
You know, you're hearing various opinions of the board of what's needed. I personally do not need the depth that is being asked for. However, the thing that I would stipulate is I would want this entire property to be limited in its ability to go to Airbnb, because it wouldn't just be Airbnb. The problem with it, and if you go out and you look at Grafton and you look at surrounding towns, Airbnb in Boston and in other towns is taking a lot of rental properties off of the rental rolls because the overnight business is more profitable. So I would want this to be a restricted property totally in that sense, and we probably have to get some definition from council if that is possible.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Mr.
I
Chair,
think that would have to be, that condition would have to come from council and maybe.
we don't
working together.
allow Airbnb.
Well, that helps.
We don't allow it? Well,
Do
you
not
can go
allow
out- You can go out,
Airbnb.
you can go out tonight.
I know you
and can get a
probably
room.
can. You probably can, and
You can get
one
multiple
of these
rooms.
days we'll try to crack down on that and on these other apartments that we have in town.
Well, I mean, Airbnb originally started, so it dealt with someone's room in a house, but there are houses that are fully available right now in the town of Grafton.
Well,
That the whole house is available Airbnb, so I would not want to see this property and those 2 apartments that you have, and if this third one were to be approved, I would not want to see it available to Airbnb or any firm like that for short-term rentals. And I would want that to carry with the deed versus just a restriction while you own it. That's the way I feel about it, and I think I'd need some counsel from town council.
I think
on
we'd
that.
be, if I could speak to that, I think we'd be willing to mirror the language that, taking Mr. Berger at his word, is in the bylaws, which I have no doubt exist. I think if we just carried that over as part of your decision, if we were fortunate enough to be granted that, I don't think that's something that we would have a problem with.
because if it's not allowed, it's not allowed, right? It's in the town bylaw, Airbnb?
Well, if it's not mentioned in our bylaw, it's not allowed.
Okay,
So it's not explicitly allowed?
yeah,
Right.
gotcha,
Oh.
okay.
So, you know, I think to Mr. Yeoman's point, I think if we're gonna try to do some conditions along those lines, we would need input from council for sure. But I think the first step is probably to get with the development team. But before I forget, does anyone wish to speak in favor of the petition? Does anyone wish to speak against the petition? Letters in favor or
None.
against? All right, thank you.
Did my memo get?
Yeah, they all have it in their files.
I do think, just to point out that no one came in opposition to this, speaks volumes about the detrimentality to this
Yep.
neighborhood, because every one of us has been to enough of these meetings where people are lined up outside the door to tell you how this is gonna ruin their neighborhood and tank their home values, and everybody here in the 300 was properly noticed. noticed, it was posted online, it was posted where it needed to be. No one was
Understood.
here.
Understood. All right, any other, so I think at this point, probably what, you might want to request a continuance. I have no idea when our next meeting might actually end up happening. I guess we need to decide that.
We do it.
We have nothing in yet. Nothing has come in, so. If we, I mean, we have Christmas in 3 weeks,
3 weeks?
Less than 3 weeks.
less than 3 weeks, actually.
It's tonight?
Actually, it was 3 weeks from yesterday.
Christmas Eve today.
Yeah, Christmas was 3 weeks from yesterday. So, I mean, I don't, if he comes.
I'm thinking
on
like the second or second or
the
ninth.
9th. The only thing, if we do the second, well, we're closed on the first. That's not that big of a deal. We're open on Tuesday. We're just closed Wednesday.
When is the first? Wednesday.
Wednesday.
I'm thinking the second or maybe even the 9th of January.
I would prefer the 9th, but I don't really get.
That's
a vote.
fine. I think we would too.
That gives him more time to meet with.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, because if he came in next Thursday to meet with.
I mean, if you
Bob-
want to go 16, 23, something, I mean, if you need,
I defer to the board on that. I'm just,
Okay.
I'm in
Yeah.
Colorado skiing.
I just have one
for
question.
the New Year.
I just have one.
Well, then.
yes.
I'm just curiosity, does the side of the unit in question, is that abut the Congregational Church?
It does.
You know, so, you know, it just, you know, I think you're being asked to look at, you know, the number of parking spaces, et cetera, but from an access point of view, I mean, you can touch that house from the, you know,
Yeah, a
basically
fire
the
truck
parking
could
lot,
get
the
in
fire,
behind this.
you know, so, you know, I don't think that those are issues. My concern is that, you know, I would look favorably upon this, I'm just one person, with the restrictions that I spoke to, that we'll have to get, maybe that can't even be restricted in that way. But I wouldn't want to see you go out and spend a ton of money with engineering, and, you know, you have to come back with a plan that shows things.
I've just requested that if we can just see this, I think it gives you a pretty good sense of
It's hard to see with all the. but
there's
it's-
wooded,
It's
but
right here.
And that, you know, just for point of reference, the pediatric clinic, they use the church parking lot. Like, it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
cooperative thing with the church, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
we're neighbors and
Well,
I
it's a
use the
village.
church parking lot and, you know.
because
You know, we're talking about fire and that sort of stuff, and that's kind of something that's kind of easy for us to get our head around. I think the important thing, though, is what the professionals in this building, who, quite frankly, are smarter than I am when it comes to these things, what they would be looking for, and that's why I defer to them. You know, who knows what it is that may be of concern or they want to know more about. So, you know, I think that's why, you know, it's important to get in front of that development team, get their input, they'll feed back to us. You know, and hopefully you can provide whatever they need, or, you know, or come back to us with, you know, what you want to do next. Any other thoughts or comments from the board? So I guess what we'll do is entertain a motion to continue case number 864?
Yeah, I think so.
864 to January 9th. And let's do it at 7:30. What's the matter?
No, I'm just writing January 9th, 2020.
Yeah, let's do 7:30 because you know, my gut tells me we may have to do executive session again, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
And rather than scheduling them when we know we're not going to, you know, be.
Right.
So
Okay.
let's do 7:30. In worst case, we'll either start the whole meeting at 7:30 or we'll do other business.
Should we save our notes? You're not.
Yes. Yeah, save your stuff.
I will come in and meet with the planning office, get criteria, which hopefully will appease everybody on what we need for this.
Have you had a survey and a site plan? Just, you know, have you had that done?
We didn't, and that weren't, it's obviously expensive. We weren't
Yeah.
sure it was gonna be necessary, so I appreciate the board's guidance on that, and we'll talk to the other town offices that are relevant on this.
Yeah, I think that's at the very minimum, you know, but, you know, parking and whatever else is. All right, so a motion to continue case number 864 to 7:30 on the 9th of January,
So moved.
2020.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Chapin?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. We'll see you on the 9th.
Thank you all, appreciate your time.
2020.
2020, yikes.
I know,
seems like
that's what
just-
I'm writing, I'm like, oh my god, 2020.
Seems like just yesterday we were concerned about Y2K.
Yeah, remember that 20 years ago? Oh, we all thought the world was gonna end.
Actually, you know, another problem is 2038. 2038 is significant to a subset of computer systems.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Is it January?
And that's, I think we're,
Is
I
that
think
what we talked about?
most of that's been addressed, but
Years.
we're closer now to 2038 than we are to.
More than we were
Y2K.
2000. Wow.
I didn't want my son born in 2000 in Y2K.
Mine was, March,
Really?
March 7th.
Like, hurry up, now's the time, let's go.
All right,
He was born in 99.
Vermont tonight. We gotta get going here. Next order of business, Fisherville's not here, we do them last. Elm Rock.
Mr. Chairman, you mind if I big table?
Come join us.
Come on down,
Here.
come on down.
I think Berger left, so.
Boy, he bailed out quickly.
Right?
Did, man.
I forgot to
He
tell-
loves to, he doesn't say.
No, I forgot to tell him we were going into an executive session at 7. So shame on me.
Oh, you're gonna hear about it.
Oh, yeah.
Do we have anything in our packets?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mailed you guys
Yeah, this
this,
turning
but
point
if you would like, here's a copy, Bill.
Oh, yes. No, no,
Got
I
it?
got it. All right, all right.
Open space.
Good evening.
Why are we here?
Thank you. Steve O'Connell, Turning Point Engineering. Chad Boardman, Will Rock LLC. We, for the 40B development off of Wheeler Road, there's a condition in the comprehensive permit that you may recall. We spent quite a bit of time on this issue. It was the area, the open space at the rear of the project.
Yep.
We had agreed upon an acreage, and there was some lengthy discussions about the use of the space, the restrictions, et cetera. Well, as time has evolved, we've been working with the Grafton Land Trust very cooperatively. They've been great to work with, and they have elected and preferred that they take the land in fee, as opposed to that land being the rear of 3 lots in the cul-de-sac.
Yep.
However, to conveniently make that happen, that requires the reconfiguration of lots 15, 16, and 17, so that we create a single parcel A that can be, description can be written in a deed and can be conveyed, really by donation, but still a conveyance to the Grafton Land Trust as parcel A. So technically, requires what we request an insubstantial modification to that condition of the permit, because we're technically reducing the land area of that parcel from 4.5 to 4.11. And the difference from 4.5 to 4.11 was, if you recall, there was a 40-foot strip of land behind lots 15, 16, and 17 that was gonna have an exclusive use easement on it.
Yeah.
The Land Trust, as you see in your packets, has written a letter of support that they are satisfied with the land area reduction from 4.5 to 4.11. That the technical process of creating parcel A by the reconfiguration of 15, 16, and 17 just results kind of, in this request. Technically, as a modification to the comp permit, we would consider it insubstantial. We hope you do too. Rob Aberg from the Grafton Land Trust is here this evening if you have any specific questions, but I think his letter, which should be in your packet, is clear in their support.
Right, yep, okay.
I have a question.
Ms. Reed?
Does it change the size of the lots of 15, 14, 15, and 16, or 15, 16, and 17?
Insignificantly.
Not.
Yeah, no, it's more about, because the easement on the back of those lots was added, so there was overlapping land.
Right.
And the overlapping part made the open space parcel 4.5 by taking that overlap away. It just
Yeah,
reduces
okay.
it. Yeah.
Is this what was referred to originally as the ancestral land?
Was
Yes.
it gonna be like the
Yes.
horse? was
Like
it-
the.
Exactly, because
the
Peter
ancestral-
Peter
Peter's
thought he was
ancestral
very,
land,
you know, he was very
that he was gonna
optimistic.
keep in the family forever, I think,
Right,
yeah.
that those lots may be for his children. His daughter had
Yeah.
horses. Right. Didn't turn out that way.
I have a couple of questions.
Mr. Yeomans?
I have a few questions, on this.
Me?
Yeah, would it be difficult to sell this? If you left this land divided up somehow between those three lots, does it make those lots more attractive? I mean, as far as, that's a piece of land that you've got to do something with. You either have to leave it with the houses, right? Or you give it to the land trust.
Correct. I
And
think what
that's
makes
what we're talking
I
about.
think what makes those lots more attractive is not having that exclusive use easement on the back,
Okay,
which the land trust also wants because they don't want to own this exclusive use easement or have this authority over it on the back of three individual lots. So it's kind of a clean break in that sense, where they're
And
going
they
to get
support-
that land in fee, the land that's shown in that purple color, which is very close to the original land shown on the plan, just a slight reduction in area. It's going to be a clean conveyance. They're going to own it just like they own the abutting land,
okay.
and with no funny, exclusive use easements on lots 15, 16, or 17.
If I may ask a question of Rob, of you, does this land provide the access point? There's some strip of land that comes out on Brigham Hill Road. Does that strip of land that goes in by Peter Adams's house, does that tie into this land?
Robert Aberg, 43 South Street, representing Grafton Land Trust. Yes, so the Marsters Preserve has an access that has an easement on it as well for that property. I don't know if it was conveyed with it, but yeah, the land trust owns a strip, I think it's either 15 feet wide or some narrow strip, right from Brigham Hill. We've just put in our permit, our permitted sign for that, so people could find it finally. And it goes all the way down to the Marsters Preserve, to the lake, and out to Wheeler Road.
Okay.
And so this does abut that little strip there, right before the Marsters Preserve gets wide. And it provides access from Brigham Hill Road into the field for horse riders, not just Adams horse riders, but any horse equestrian. And it would help us keep the field open as well.
Okay.
Yep, at the bottom of the TV, you can see where those green lines come close to the purple polygon. That's the strip Rob's referring to. Yeah.
And it should show up on the GIS as well, pretty clearly.
Yeah.
I have one other question.
Mr. Yeomans?
As I studied this, a couple of things that came out, the access point to this for the other neighbors are going to be between lots 11 and 12.
That's correct, as originally approved during the comp permit process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there going to be, is that going to be memorialized on the plans and on the deeds of those people that buy those houses and on their lots? And the reason I bring that up is that Bill and I have spent time along with Jeff over here walking other developments where the people have become somewhat surprised that we're able to access, the nature preserves going by their bedrooms. So I would want to ensure that that is well memorialized on those deeds. And secondly, one of the points you make is neighborhood access point between lot 11 and 12. When you say neighborhood access, now I live on Meadowbrook across the street. And there's another development going in across the street with 6 houses that the land trust is involved in, at least the proposal there on Wheeler Road, on the McNiff property. I believe it. Yeah. So when you say neighborhood access, I have access then, all of the houses that you're building have access to that land trust land between houses number 11 and 12. And in addition, I'm living over on Meadowbrook. I'm in the neighborhood. There are, I don't know, what are there, 100 houses over on Meadowbrook?
Do you mean Meadow Lane? Meadowbrook's
Meadow Lane, across
Yeah,
the
yeah.
street on
Meadow
Will
Lane.
Road. Is it Meadow?
Meadow Lane.
Meadow Lane, excuse me. Meadowbrook is the other part.
I knew what you
Yeah.
meant.
I shocked some people on that one. Yeah, but Meadow Lane. So when you make reference in here that it's going to be neighborhood access.
Yeah, it's community access. There's really no restrictions.
So there's no restriction. So those people that buy those two lots, I think that should be clearly marked on your deed and in your description, because again, we ran into the surprise people over there on another project that, it was like, gee, what do you mean? This is the way, this is the trail around the whole unit.
And the convenient, oh, sorry, Bill.
I was gonna say, what you're talking about though has nothing to do with
With
this parcel.
No, but they bring it up that that's the access in their documentation here.
Yeah.
They're saying that the access point to the land will be between those houses.
Between 11 and 12 across existing GLT land to get,
Yeah, additional access, right.
right.
And it's easy to memorialize that because that's also an easement for the stormwater basin. And that's where the access down for the
Right.
stormwater
So it would be,
basin will occur.
that's the access to it, then
I
that's,
have to put
that's
it-
an easier thing to memorialize.
I have to
then,
put it
yeah.
in the deeds anyways, yes.
Yep.
So that's gonna, what's the width of that access for the basin?
20, I believe it's 20 feet.
25 feet? 20
Yeah,
feet?
10 on each lot.
Okay.
I believe it's 20.
So that's, okay, so it's not like,
And it's
it's not like there's a sign going up that somebody's, okay, there's access there now.
Yep, correct.
Then that
So
would be similar.
It'll
And it's a
be,
little bit harder to fill that in,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like we saw in that other neighborhood.
Yep, and there's a condition in the comp permit that allows the land trust or other entities to provide, some trail head type signage or, little square little fence to indicate, we're just gonna make sure that maintenance equipment for the stormwater basin can get in there, but
Right.
Just one additional question, Mr. Chair. Then, as I recall, the lots that had some conservation restrictions on them, are these two of the lots? There were some special
orders of condition.
orders of conditions on the rear of those lots. Were those lots?
No, those lots were lots 5 through
Okay.
10.
All right.
Yeah, down closer to the street.
Yep.
Yep, all right. Well,
Other thoughts or comments from the board?
Pretty black and white.
Forward, yep.
Yeah, it seems very straightforward. Seems like the right thing to do.
You answered my question.
Jeff, you have any comments?
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
So at this point, it's not, there's no one here to talk anyway, so, I think I think what we can do is a motion to determine the change as proposed in Turning Point's letter dated November 5th, 2019 is insubstantial. So it'd be motion that the project change as described in Turning Point's letter of November 5th, 2019 is insubstantial. That's the motion to
So
make the
moved.
determination.
Second.
Any further discussion? Then we just do probably a roll call vote. Mr. Chapin?
Yes.
Mr. Yeoman?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So we determine this to be an insubstantial change.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
I think the next step would be, as the permitting authority, normally in a subdivision or, land lot line reconfiguration is a plan called an A&R plan or a Form A plan. The direction we received is that, the zoning board would sign that plan, being it a 40B project. So we have the plan that reconfigures the lot lines.
Has Jeff reviewed that plan?
I have not.
Okay, so are you really anxious to have that signed? So let's have Jeff sign it, 'cause what we generally want to do is have Jeff sign it, say Jeff review it
Yep.
and say it's okay to sign, we can sign it too.
No, thank you.
So Jeff review it
First.
and,
Then we,
you know, give us the okay that,
Sure. Sounds fine.
yeah.
We'll,
So we do that and then, you know, our next meeting is gonna be in apparently the 9th and we can do it then.
Okay.
may I ask one additional question?
Yes.
I've driven before the snow, and I've looked at, your change to the one bedroom, how is that being received to the bedroom on the first floor from all of the colonials having the bedrooms?
I've got 4 pre-sales and I've got a mix of 50-50 sales right now. So I've got 2 with first floor masters and then 2 with conventional, 1 masters on the second floor.
Was I
And those are sold.
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent.
Yeah.
that's excellent.
Yeah,
I think,
Bob's
I thought
reviewing more
that
right
was, that was a sweet move going in there. I mean, the people that are, like a lot of people in this room, you know, buying
Yeah.
into the,
No, I appreciate you went by. Obviously, it was pretty impressive. A lot of the people in town actually said, "Wow, you guys have your,
well, it was nice.
plank together," because we built all the everything. You know, all the stormwater basins.
Oh, yeah, and
We had
everything,
the torrential downpours and
everything was grassed
no
in.
issues, grassed
It
in.
was-
Right, yeah.
And then the snow came.
Yeah, and then the snow came, of course. Yeah.
I actually haven't been, I had no idea anything.
No, it
Oh,
looks-
he's,
it
the 2
looks-
houses on Wheeler Road are just about done?
They're one's being painted right now in the interior, and the other one's just rough framed.
Yeah,
but,
okay, yeah.
The 2 approval not required lots on Wheeler Road, have those sold? The 2
No,
out?
believe it or not, no. Ones inside are. I
Okay,
expect the ones out on the road have a lot of options in them, so they're a little bit more pricey.
okay.
And they're on the
But I
road.
like to use them as a model home regardlessly, so there was a little method to my madness.
Do they have, do either of those have the bedroom on the first floor?
Yes, both of them actually.
Oh, they do?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, Bill might
We're
be
out
moving
sometime.
in.
No,
The
no, I'm
No,
at
he
the other
likes
part of
the-
the
he
runway
likes
of the airport.
Both
Yeah.
masters have a fireplace in the.
Oh, they do?
Sold.
Ah,
So Bill
That-
just said A and R. There weren't any A and R part
There's 2
lots. Oh, were there?
There's
So those
2
are outside the
lots.
40B.
They were part of the 40B, but
They are.
they utilized the frontage on Wheeler Road.
So they're not A and R.
They're not technically
They're not
A&R.
technically. Okay, all
Bob
right.
released the permits because they had fire access
Right.
and the road was already there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Similar, as you know, with the correspondence with releasing the phasing of the road, I'll probably come to the next meeting.
All right, I was gonna ask where we
And
stood
Jeff
with that.
will do the entire project. The entire road has been built. There was a little
Yeah.
bit of confusion. I kind of liked not to, I, I do it to keep me in line and the town in line a lot. I tried to release certain sections of road and then I build the units in that section. Of course, when people come to buy homes, I go, well, I want the one at the end of the cul-de-sac. So I'm not like the typical builder. Yeah, I'll build your house over here. Then I've got this stuff all over the place. It just looks like crap. So I try to force myself to go in and then not bond a section of road. And typically for financing purposes, I have to come up with the dough and the 20% contingencies and the 20% overcall. It hurts my lending ability to do certain things. So that's why I originally came with doing up to 8+0. But I think we'll come and do the remainder of the cul-de-sac because it's only another 400 feet and that will release the whole road for occupancy, of course.
All right, I know, in just for the benefit of the board, I've had some conversation with Dan Hill. I know Dan Hill's working with the attorney for the developer and trying to set up the surety or however they want to handle it. I know they're going back and forth and,
Yep.
you know, I was gonna ask, so that's still progressing and it.
That's correct, and I believe the permits were in Bob's hands, and the water was an issue that you need to fight fires,
Yep.
and of course, the water's live. We've got some documentation.
Yeah, I got the letter from the water department.
Said he
this
wouldn't give me
week.
permits, and obviously until there was asphalt there, so that was one of the other things. So I'm sure he's reviewing it now.
But, okay, but as far as permits for houses on the road,
Yes,
I don't think you can get those until the surety or whatever is worked out.
it's tied to the occupancy. It's tied to the occupancy.
Oh, so you
permit,
can't get
according to-
occupancy
I can't
until.
get occupancy, but
All right, that's fine, so you got time.
I've got 4 months to build the houses on.
No,
that
no,
road.
got it,
Yeah,
got it.
we
So
got time.
We'll be back in.
Wasn't a scramble to try to get
wasn't a scramble.
the bond all the way to the end of the cul-de-sac for this meeting.
Okay.
You know,
I'd like to try.
Well, it sounded like it
I
was
try-
actually.
Well, I know I try
Well,
to do
we-
things in advance.
Yeah, we wanted to, belts and suspenders, try to do everything we could possibly do to make it easy for the board. If something that Bob was gonna be looking for before he released permits, but we got
Right.
indication
No,
that,
you're right, it is occupancy, okay.
so. we're happy and
Yeah, we appreciate
hopefully you
it.
guys are happy.
Good.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Steve, I did notice, Steve, all the double catch basins.
Yeah,
On one side of the road.
yeah, on one side, they're coming down from the,
Those
from
babies
the,
must be touching that water.
yeah, from the farm up there, from Mr.
I gotta go
Cruz.
take a ride up there.
Yeah, looks good.
Is the
Does
road
look
open?
nice.
Can we drive on the road? Is it open?
There's a gate, per our CMP meeting, but sometimes it's open, but encourage everybody to take a drive through. Doesn't look great because of the snow, but before it was pretty impressive when you went out there. too.
No, it looked, yeah.
I've driven down Wheeler. It does look really great.
Good.
Nice.
Okay.
From our
Awesome.
perspective, as far as construction goes, we're very happy. Progress has been good. Hydro seed was applied as quickly as possible, so things have been going well from our
Good grass already.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Wow.
That's why I was nervous trying to start the place with you guys, so.
Gotta get that grass planted.
That's why I was
Grass is
stressed
so
at the first
important.
meetings coming to see you guys, because I knew the grass season was coming to an end.
No, and just, now that the land trust has the land in the back, which is something that, I think
awesome.
we all kind of wanted from the start,
Yeah,
and Peter's reluctant to do, so I think it's working
Yeah,
well.
that's great.
It is.
yeah,
We're happy.
absolutely.
Okay, great.
Well, thank
Oh,
you.
when did you close on buying this from Peter?
Oh, boy, maybe in the spring, early spring, probably.
I can probably.
Cause I believe he said that he needs to wait a year before he can get back on the board.
Oh.
Oh,
We have an open seat.
Yeah,
open.
I
So I wanna know when
no,
I.
to come
no, I
back
can
on.
look it up.
Yeah,
I can look it up.
we
Because I
miss
have
Peter.
everything.
yeah, you have everything,
We miss Peter on the board.
So sometime in the spring I can start harassing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe he'll harass you.
What's this Fisherville Terrace?
Yeah, maybe.
we'll get there.
Do
We'll
that
get there.
next.
Sorry.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Good night, guys.
Yeah, have a Merry Christmas.
All right.
everyone.
Yeah.
too.
Next
You
order,
too.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
next order
guys.
of business is, the
night,
letter we
everybody.
have from Winslow. Thanks, Jeff. Winslow Architects, this concerns Providence, no, not Providence Road, what is it? It's, Fisherville.
Fisherville Terrace.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the one that's up behind St. James Church. It looks like he's asking for another year extension.
So what happened was he came before us last year with somebody who was willing to buy it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I don't know if he didn't get approved through DCHD or he decided it was too much work, whatever, he has backed out. John is still actively trying to find somebody or start the construction, and he apologized. He was going to be here tonight and something happened and he couldn't get out of whatever came up for tonight. So he's just asking for another 1-year extension.
All right, we've granted this a lot in the past. I think the general consensus is we put a lot of work into, creating this, and I don't think anyone besides myself was on the board at the time.
It's 10 years. This is,
It was, I had just started that July and came in at the tail end of it, and this decision was voted on Christmas Eve
Really?
of 2010.
Wow.
And that
So-
was just as the market tanked. So it's,
So, I'm fine with giving him another year to try and get something put together here. There's actually, in our package, there's a note from him to Katrina, saying he's not gonna be able to be here, but, the project does have high site development costs. I mean, he's got a huge drainage system that he's gotta
Yep.
bring off the hill down into Main Street and then tie into and rebuild some stuff on Main Street, so, it's gonna be tough, I think, but regardless, we'll give him another year, in my mind, I have no problem granting a 1-year extension.
Yeah.
So a motion to, allow a 1-year extension for the Fisherville Terrace comprehensive permit.
so moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion made second, any discussion? Do a roll call again, Mr. Chapin?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes.
Where's this development?
It's like up behind,
So you
St.
know where
James
South
Church.
Grafton Elementary School is?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I know
St.
where it
There's
is.
the
Yeah,
church.
yeah, yes, yes.
It's
yes,
it's
okay.
that huge hill up
Yeah,
back in there
Yeah.
that backs up into Sutton.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got some weird topography.
Well, that and the way the development in Sutton was built, and they did a bunch of funky stuff, so the drainage coming off back
Yeah.
there is even
Oh,
more
that's
so.
on the backside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
All right, so, in our packets, there's, some notes here from Graves about Elm Rock. This concerns the
Bond.
the bonding.
That-
So I think this is dated. I don't think we even need to keep it. I expect that Jeff will get us another one.
Yep.
Initially, he was asking for surety he wanted to just provide surety for the first 800 feet of the road. And Dan and I kind of went back and forth. It's like, I think he really needs to provide surety for the whole road, and I think that's the direction he's heading, so that will get updated. I think we have some minutes that we're supposed to review. We need to keep this.
15th.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, you know
All
what?
right, so let's look at August 15th.
Oh, yeah, we skipped it last time.
We skipped it last
Yeah.
time because
Because we all.
I was tired and I wanted to leave.
Go
and
home.
I'm tired and I want to leave
Drive.
now.
Well, because
Yeah.
he was driving up to Vermont.
I'm driving up to Vermont tonight.
Again? My
Yes,
goodness.
Well, he's got snow.
Oh, yeah, you gotta ski.
I guess somebody's got to do some work in there tomorrow.
Yeah, and my contract was at my house this week. I didn't go down.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Yeah, I was down all weekend.
I have no recollection of this road, this case on Hingham Road. I don't know if that's good or
Road.
bad.
Oh, yeah, I remember
Sounds like
this.
there wasn't a lot to it.
No.
I don't see anything.
Yeah, I don't either.
Motion to accept the meeting minutes of August 15th, 2019 as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are accepted. So then October.
Okay, do you want to sign those for me?
Oh, National Grid. God, I hate that.
And then I'll print the ones from the 17th. I'll have you sign them before you leave. tonight.
Okay.
Did we actually do a decision?
On National Grid, we amended.
Did we all sign something?
Yes.
Did I sign it?
You actually did come in and sign those. Yes.
Okay.
I wasn't there that day, but yeah, you did.
Weston Street. Again, these are all fairly straightforward.
Looks good to me.
Yeah.
Can we just sign this?
No, because that says draft.
Oh,
Motion to accept the meeting minutes of October 17th, 2019 as submitted.
so moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Reorg. So, anybody want to be chairman?
I nominate Bill McCusker to be chair, continuing, based on his fine record of past performance.
Let no good deed go unpunished.
Is there a
I
second
Thank you.
somewhere?
Thank you. Very kind words.
No,
Any other nominations?
Can we, what about vice chair?
well, we have
Well,
to
we do
vote on
one
it.
at
I have to vote on you first? Okay, I agree. We know you didn't want to hear that.
So,
You're too good at this, Bill.
thank you.
I agree.
You're too smart.
So I guess it would be all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yep. Aye.
Thank you. Very do
I
appreciate it.
recommend, and nominate, Mary Ann to be vice chair.
I agree.
I second that.
Yep. Great.
Any other nominations?
I nominate, Bill Yeomans
Well, I
to
think you have
remain
to,
vice chair.
Well,
I think you have to do one or the other, right?
no.
No?
Not necessarily.
Well, I appreciate the nomination and your faith in me, to serve continue as vice chair, but, I feel that, Mary Ann, has shown an interest, and, I think it would be good for someone else to serve as vice chair.
Good training and
And as
maybe.
we, and, as more, and we have a good board, and more people, can back up, other people. And, hopefully, at some point in the future, we can remove Mr. McCusker
Right.
as
So,
chairman.
yeah, no, to that point,
you mean
and actually, I don't think Carl's aware of this. I have talked to Bill a little bit, I've talked to Mary Ann a little bit about it. I don't wanna be chairman anymore, I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm just tired.
Yeah.
And, so I really would like someone else, so initially, it approached Mr. Yeomans about taking it back, and I don't think Mr. Yeomans really wants to do it either at this point. So Mary Ann actually is somewhat interested in so a rough plan, if you will, would be for Mary Ann to be vice chair
Right.
and then take over as chairman next year.
If someone nominates her.
Right.
That's true. You can count on this. I will be nominating her. I'll nominate her right now.
No, I think it'd be great, just a good.
So that's kind of,
Learning thing, yeah.
an idea, right? And, so I really would like to, I enjoy being part of the board. I have no desire necessarily to leave the board, but it is demanding, at times, and, just from a personal and professional point of view, I'm tired.
It's a lot,
And-
yeah.
And I just.
Your knowledge is so huge, and you just, when I listen to how you, the questions you ask and what you have such an incredible amount of history on this board, and I just respect that so much. It's hard to see. I'm glad that you would want to stay, because I think it would be a huge loss for this board. But I think that Mary Ann wants to learn and take, because I listen to what you do, I'm like, there's no way I could be the chairman of this board. I just don't think, I wouldn't have the time either, because I'm too busy in my business, but I think it's great that Mary Ann has the interest with her legal background. I think it's a great idea, so I think
But I
it's
definitely
awesome.
need Bill to stay on.
Well, yeah,
Help me
because
grow.
there's so much that you
I know that feeling.
Yeah,
Because-
so I appreciate the fact that you're tired, though. You've been doing this a long time,
Yeah.
but you're a huge asset to this board, so I think it'd be really,
Oh, no doubt.
be really tough to
Well,
not
thank
have you
you.
on the board,
So
seriously.
that's the thinking. I think that's
Okay.
why Mary Ann was nominated and,
Okay, I think that's great.
So we have a nomination. Is there a second on that?
I second it.
Okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Actually, I wanted you anyway, yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
So, and
then
I
clerk.
nominate, for clerk, I nominate Carl, to serve as clerk if he's so inclined.
I enjoy your confidence, but no, I think, rather have Kay. I decline that.
Okay, well, that's,
It's not
I'll
hard.
make everybody happy. I decline.
It doesn't matter.
Wait a minute. That's all I needed to say was I declined?
Then where would we be?
well, I felt that it was a chance too for you to be involved in,
Not yet.
in more.
I know my limitations.
Yeah.
I truly do.
No,
It's not difficult, so I'm
Then
fine to
he's,
stay as clerk.
then I nominate then, Kay Reed to, continue to serve as clerk.
Second?
That's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
So we are
we
real,
are reorganized. I think
Yeah,
that's,
and we need another alternate, right?
we do need another alternate.
Yep, it is.
All right.
Got one around somewhere?
Like, what if my husband wanted to be on it? Can you have spouses? Or is there
They do
something
on the
against
planning
that?
board.
Planning board does.
Planning board does.
Because I said to him the other day, would you like to be on this? He's like, I don't know, maybe. So
Yeah, he
I'll
could.
ask him. He's a smart guy.
Yeah, no, I don't
I
think
didn't know
there's
if
any
it
issue
was
with it.
not allowed or I don't know for sure, but
well, he's gonna have to
I was
print
just
the interview.
curious. What? He's gonna have to what?
Come to
You're gonna have to
interview.
come in for interviews
Oh, of
before the
course.
board. I mean, we're not just gonna open
No, it
this
was
up
just a
just
question. I
because you just.
I didn't, yeah, I know. Do you guys advertise it though? Like, is it hard to get people?
Yes,
on the
Hard to
website.
find
It
people?
is.
Really?
it is.
That's fine. No, I get
Maybe
what
you
I
do
do.
it. I don't know. I mean, it's not that.
That's all
I need
to
somebody
do.
to motion to adjourn.
Oh, yes.
Well, I don't know, do we
Oh.
have anything else?
With bills or anything?
The things,
There was one bill
you come in and sign.
that's in the blue folder right there to sign. It's for Cliff,
Okay.
yeah, it's Cliff
Feel free to
Bowman.
sign.
You know, there's a transition that takes place.
Just to give you guys an
Bill.
update on Mr. Ignorani.
Oh, Mr. Garani.
You could think about it.
He has come before Joe again to ask to have the
Yep.
road accepted at town meeting. So we had a meeting with him Tuesday morning, Joe, myself, and Jeff from Graves, and it was Ignorani and Barlow. So they think the town accepting the roads is one thing, and the drainage issue when building the final 3 lots is a separate thing. And Joe tried to explain to him that yes and no, it is. Because it's a subdivision, that yes, the town has to accept the road and we've got to follow the subdivision rules and regulations. But because it was built under a 40B, they have to actually come before this board with everything, to have this board approve them to go before the select board to have the road accepted.
Right.
So we were trying to get that through to them that, okay, you may want the road accepted, but this board may say, that's great that you're ready to have the road accepted, but you still have this drainage issue,
the
and you still have 3 lots to build.
Right.
Davis.
We kinda got yesed, like we have in the past, so we're not sure how that's gonna go. But I just wanted to give you guys that heads up, that that could be coming down the pike.
So I'll just add on to that. There is no requirement that all lots be built or sold for roads to be accepted.
Correct.
But there is a requirement that things like drainage works.
Correct.
And, before the town would accept the roads, because if the drainage actually is faulty, then they may have to dig up the roads, et cetera, and the town doesn't want to have to be responsible for that. And,
Do I need to sign this?
you know, there obviously is a very big question up there right now about whether the drainage works or not, because somebody's house is flooded. All right, we'll see where that goes. There's really nothing for us to do until they
Correct.
come to us and ask us to do something.
And our next meeting is on January.
January 9th.
Right now, there's no new
And-
cases, so
Do you want a
Nope.
motion to adjourn?
a motion to adjourn.
I so move. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?